If you're ever lost in a dense forest or a sprawling desert without a compass, your brain plays a very, very convincing trick on you.
Oh, yeah. The straight line illusion.
Exactly. You will swear with absolute certainty that you are walking in a perfectly straight line.
But without an objective external reference point, you inevitably veer off. Usually because, one leg is just slightly longer or stronger than the other.
Right. And that tiny, imperceptible bias just keeps pulling you off track. You think you're making progress, but you're actually just looping back into the wilderness. And that illusion, mistaking the feeling of moving forward for actual progress, is the core focus of a brilliant piece of writing we're looking at today.
There really is.
It's by the author SpiralSeekr, called The Cost of Comfort. And to the listener joining us, welcome to this custom deep dive. We know you want to gain knowledge quickly but thoroughly, without feeling overwhelmed, so that's exactly what we're going to do.
And this source, this April 4th, 2026 post by SpiralSeekr, it is just, it's a paradigm-shifting read.
It really is. Our mission today is to explore the fascinating divergence between temporary stability and long-term functionality. Basically, why our natural instincts often lead us totally astray.
Because SpiralSeekr is basically holding up a mirror to the peace and quiet you might be experiencing in your life right now and asking, is this actual stability or are you just on a really comfortable descent?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our most natural human instinct when things get hard isn't to fix the problem, is it?
No, not at all.
It's to seek cover, to hide behind what the text calls a kind lie.
Right, the kind lie, which it sounds benevolent, which is precisely why it works so well.
That sounds like a good thing.
It does, but it's actually a falsehood or an omission of truth, specifically designed to preserve temporary harmony. It is the ultimate path of least resistance to avoid immediate confrontation or discomfort.
I have to admit, I do this all the time.
We all do.
Just last week, I explicitly told myself I didn't need to look at my bank account balance before a weekend trip because, ignorance is bliss.
Right.
I preserved my Friday night harmony, but I definitely wasn't doing my budget any favors.
That is the perfect microexample. You opted for the kind lie.
I really did.
You avoided the immediate friction of knowing you might be overspending, and in return, you bought yourself a stress-free weekend, but you didn't alter the reality of your finances.
No, the money was still gone. It feels a bit like, imagine having a leaky roof in your living room.
Okay.
And the water is dripping right onto your favorite rug. So you grab a bucket.
Yep.
And you put it under the leak. Instantly, there is peace. The water isn't ruining the rug anymore.
The immediate crisis is averted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You sit back on the couch, listen to the rhythmic drip, drip, drip into the bucket, and you think, I fixed it. Harmony is restored.
Right.
But that bucket completely ignores the rotting wood up in the ceiling. The actual structural problem is totally unaddressed.
It is. The bucket gives you the illusion of a dry house. And SpiralSeekr backs up why this illusion is mathematically dangerous by pointing to a concept called the Mizer Graph.
The Mizer Graph.
Yeah, this is where the text moves from psychology into systems thinking.
Hold on, though, before we get into the math of it all.
Sure.
If a lie genuinely de-escalates a fight and saves my weekend, or saves a relationship from a massive blowout on a random Tuesday, why is that automatically doomed? Why isn't stability just stability?
Because we are defining stability wrong.
Oh.
We tend to think of stability as a flat line. Zero movement, no fighting, no stress, no bad news.
Right.
But the Mizer Graph illustrates that in any complex system, whether that's a human body, a marriage, or a corporation, a lack of active correction isn't stability, it's entropy.
Okay, walk me through this graph. What am I actually picturing here?
So picture a standard chart. Your x-axis, running horizontally from left to right, represents time.
Okay.
And your y-axis, running vertically from bottom to top, represents systemic functionality.
Systemic functionality.
Right, which is just a measure of how well your relationship, your organization, or your own mind is actually working.
Got it. So time on the bottom, functionality on the side.
Exactly. Now, draw a horizontal line right through the middle. That's your baseline.
Okay.
We assume that when we tell a kind lie, when we put the bucket under the leak, we are just riding along that horizontal line. We assume we are maintaining the status quo.
Because nothing is currently on fire. The bucket is catching the water.
Right. But Mizer's mathematical model shows that the line isn't horizontal at all.
Wait, really?
Really? What's fascinating here is the mechanics of what SpiralSeekr calls the downward impulse. Every single time you choose the kind lie to avoid friction, you introduce a downward
A
impulse.
downward impulse.
Yeah, it's a microfracture in the structural integrity of the system.
So instead of a flat horizontal line, the graph actually shows a staircase going down.
More like a gentle, almost imperceptible slope that eventually curves into a sheer cliff.
Oh, wow.
Because these downward impulses accumulate what we call systemic debt. Let's go back to your bank account example.
Okay, yeah.
The first Friday, you don't look. It's a tiny dip on the y-axis. You survive the weekend. But the system, your financial health, is slightly less functional because you are operating on bad data.
And the next Friday, the dip is a bit steeper because now I'm compounding the ignorance.
Exactly.
I'm basically building debt on top of debt.
Yes. The math dictates that without friction, without an upward corrective impulse, entropy takes over. The Mizer Graph mathematically proves that a system avoiding truth doesn't stay flat. It accelerates toward dysfunction.
That phrase SpiralSeekr uses the cumulative weight of avoided truths. It's just so heavy.
It really is.
It implies that these lies don't just vanish into the ether, they stack up. And the text points out that this stacking happens in 3 specific arenas: ourselves, our relationships, and our organizations.
Right, those are the 3.
But reading through this, it doesn't seem like these are isolated arenas at all. They feel more like interlocking gears.
They are entirely interconnected. The dysfunction almost always starts internally with the first gear, which is the kind lie to the self.
Like ignoring chronic burnout.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You tell yourself your exhaustion is just a busy week or, a tough month. You preserve the temporary harmony of your daily routine by slamming another coffee and pushing through.
Oh, I've been there.
Right. You avoid the massive, terrifying truth that you might need to fundamentally change your career or your lifestyle. That is a downward impulse on your personal y-axis.
But my baseline functionality is dropping. Like, I'm physically exhausted, my patience is thin, my cognitive load is maxed out.
Which immediately spills into the second gear, your relationships.
Ah, of course.
You come home, you're secretly drained, and your partner does that recurring thing that crosses a boundary. Normally, you'd have the energy to address it.
Right, you'd communicate.
But you're exhausted from the internal kind lie you've been living all day. So you use another kind lie to keep the peace. You say nothing. You just swallow the annoyance.
So now I've weakened the structural integrity of my own mind and the trust in my relationship. The rot is spreading from the self to the partnership.
And the resentment silently builds.
Yeah.
Then you take that compromised, exhausted version of yourself into the third gear, your workplace, your organization.
Oh, man. I see where this cascading failure goes.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
If I can't even tell myself the truth about my sleep, and I can't tell my partner the truth about my boundaries, I'm definitely not going to be the one to tell my boss that the new software architecture our team is building is fundamentally broken.
Exactly. You sit in the project status meeting. Everyone looking at the code knows it's a mess.
Yeah.
But raising your hand creates immediate, agonizing friction. It ruins the meeting. It upsets the executives. It means working over the weekend. So the whole team nods and says, "We're on track."
We're on track. Wow, temporary harmony is preserved.
The ultimate organizational kind lie. No immediate confrontation.
But look at where you are in the Mizer Graph now. The individual, the relationship, and the organization are all riding that downward curve.
Yep. The systemic debt across all 3 arenas is massive at that point.
And eventually, what?
Yeah.
The product launches and fails catastrophically, bringing down the company's quarter. The relationship implodes from years of unspoken resentment. And you end up in the hospital with a stress-induced health crisis.
Chaos. The predictable, mathematically certain destination. You think you're maintaining stability all the way down, but you're just systematically dismantling your own foundation.
You putting out buckets while the entire house collapses.
It is bleak. But SpiralSeekr doesn't just leave us in the wreckage of these collapsing systems.
Awfully.
The text provides an alternative, an antidote, but it requires a complete fundamental rewiring of how we perceive discomfort. The author calls this antidote the unkind truth.
The unkind truth, even just hearing the phrase makes my shoulders tense up a bit.
Right.
It sounds like a euphemism for just being a jerk to everyone around you.
I know, but here's where it gets really interesting. It has nothing to do with cruelty or malice. The text defines unkind truths as moments of friction, realization, or necessary confrontation.
Okay.
They are unkind only in the sense that they do not care about your temporary comfort. They actively disrupt your peace. They pierce the illusion.
But if I am the person trying to build a stable life, if I am trying to climb the y-axis of that Mizer graph to a higher level of functionality, Why would I intentionally introduce friction?
Well,
As the text even admits, these truths cause dips in progress. They are jarring. They are painful. It seems entirely counterproductive. If my goal is upward momentum, why am I slamming on the brakes to have a painful confrontation?
because you aren't slamming on the brakes. You are initiating a controlled burn. Think about the mechanics of forest management.
Okay, like the park rangers.
Yeah. For a very long time, the institutional policy in forestry was to extinguish every single fire immediately, preserve the peace at all costs, never let anything burn.
Which sounds logical.
It does. But what happened? The dead brush, the fallen branches, the systemic debt of the forest floor just piled up year after year.
Oh, the kind lie, the illusion of a completely safe, stable forest.
Exactly. And then, inevitably, a lightning strike catches, and because of all that accumulated dry fuel, you don't just get a normal fire. You get a catastrophic, uncontrollable mega fire that destroys the soil, the canopy, the entire ecosystem.
That is the descent into chaos.
Yes. The alternative, the unkind truth, is the controlled burn. Park rangers intentionally set fires. They deliberately introduce destruction and friction into the system.
And it looks like a massive setback from the outside. The forest is scorched. It smells like smoke. It's visually jarring. If you didn't know better, you'd think the system was failing.
But that fire burns away the dead brush. It resets the systemic debt. It prevents the megafire. And ecologically, that jarring destruction is the exact mechanism that causes certain seeds to open and new growth to start.
Wow.
The friction isn't a failure of the system. The friction is a corrective mechanism.
A corrective mechanism. So SpiralSeekr is basically saying we have to act as the park rangers of our own lives.
Precisely.
We have to intentionally set the awkward conversation on fire before it turns into a divorce. We have to torch the bad project before it bankrupts the company.
Yes. The text explicitly states that while these unkind truths temporarily lower our perceived stability, just like a scorched forest, looks temporarily worse. They provide the essential data needed to recalibrate and ascend.
The essential data. That makes it sound like a software stress test.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Like you hire a team of white hat hackers to deliberately break your code. It causes a temporary system failure, alarms go off, people panic, but it exposes the hidden vulnerabilities so you can actually patch it.
That's a perfect modern equivalent. You cannot know the system is broken unless you allow the friction to expose the break. The pain of the confrontation in your relationship is the essential data you need to draw real, sustainable boundaries. The pain of admitting the software project is failing is the raw data the executive team needs to pivot and build something that actually works.
And the pain of acknowledging your own burnout is the exact data you need to fundamentally restructure your daily life.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely redefines the functional system.
It really does. It completely upends how I think about the word functional, because my default assumption, and I think the default for most people, is that a functional system is a peaceful system.
Right, of course.
A functional relationship has no fighting. A functional engineering team has no internal disagreements. A well-adjusted person never experiences an identity crisis.
But SpiralSeekr is directly attacking that assumption. A system entirely devoid of conflict is just a forest accumulating dead brush. It's the flat line of the Mizer Graph, which we now know is actually a downward slope.
Okay.
A truly functional system doesn't avoid conflict. It requires it. It utilizes conflict to drive upward momentum.
It utilizes the conflict. It doesn't just survive it, it uses it as the fuel for the ascent.
Without the friction of the unkind truth, you are flying blind without a compass.
Which destroys the whole myth of linear progress, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
We have this collective image in our heads, probably from corporate earnings charts or motivational posters, that progress is just a smooth diagonal arrow pointing up and to the right,
Fine.
a steady climb.
The linear myth. SpiralSeekr argues that to choose growth, you must accept that progress is rarely a linear ascent. It is a series of painful corrections toward a higher standard.
It's a jagged line.
It is a profoundly jagged line. You move forward, you initiate a controlled burn in unkind truth, you experience a dip in perceived stability, that jarring moment of friction.
Yeah.
You use the essential data from that friction to patch the vulnerability, to clear the brush, and then you ascend to a higher baseline of functionality than you were at before. And then, you have to be willing to repeat the process all over again.
So what does this all mean? It really boils down to a stark binary choice, doesn't it? We've covered a lot of ground today in this deep dive, from the Mizer Graph to forest fires, but the synthesis of SpiralSeekr's entire argument is sitting right there at the end of the text.
It is. The text concludes by stating that you must choose between the comfort of a descending lie or the discomfort of an ascending truth.
You, listening right now, have to make that choice. You are either choosing the comfort of a descending lie or the discomfort of an ascending truth, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
They really couldn't.
Whether you're analyzing your own internal monologue, the dynamics of your marriage, or the long-term viability of the company you're building, are you preserving temporary harmony at the cost of your structural integrity? Are you putting out buckets, or are you tearing down the ceiling to finally fix the rotting roof?
Because recognizing the difference between that artificial temporary peace and actual jagged, hard-won progress is the shortcut to long-term functionality. It is how you stop the mathematical descent into chaos.
But it requires fighting your own biology. Your brain wants to save energy. It desperately wants the path of least resistance.
Yeah, it does.
It wants you to just keep walking in circles in the woods because admitting you are lost and walking in a straight line hurts.
But the unkind truth is the compass. Looking at it might make you realize you have been walking in the completely wrong direction for months or even years.
And that realization is a massive setback. It's jarring. It's painful. But it is the only way you are ever going to find your way out of the trees.
It is the essential data needed to recalibrate and ascend.
So we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you step back into your day. If a functional system truly requires utilizing conflict to drive upward momentum, then the next time you experience the painful friction of an unkind truth, that exact moment your stomach drops during a hard conversation, or when a massive flaw in your work is suddenly exposed, how can you train yourself to view that exact moment of jarring discomfort not as a failure or a setback, but as the precise essential data you need to finally ascend?